Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Scott Baker. I'm the Assistant Director of the Gallery. And our director is out on a mission, so on her behalf, I would like to welcome you all. This is one of the few times of the year where we actually have a function in the gallery as well as an exhibit on the walls. So what I would like to do is to introduce you again to Dr. Ahmed, who will do the program. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you all for coming. Welcome to the Department of Arts. And very quickly, I just want to introduce our interim chair of the Department of Art to give you the opening remarks and formally start the proceedings. Professor Reginald Pointer.
Hello. Welcome to Howard University. Really glad to see you all here. Matter of fact, more than that, welcome to the art department, which in my mind is probably the most important department in the university. I'm slightly biased, and it's also true. Okay, I was going to start off by telling you a joke. I got a couple of jokes that I like to make people laugh, but this situation we're dealing with here is pretty serious, so I'm going to table that joke and instead give you a little bit of history about myself. Just a little bit. What you may or may not know about me. Prior to working here at Grambling, I was working at Grambling, prior to working here at Howard, I was working at Grambling State University, another HBCU. Prior to working at that HBCU, I was working at Duke Ellington School of the Arts here in DC. Prior to that, I was working at a place called the Exceptional Children's Foundation in Los Angeles, which did not deal with any children at all. The name was derived from a time in which individuals with disabilities were not necessarily funneled into the public school system. So this program was set up for them to get their education, not be in that big pool of folks who are considered normal. But as time went on and they allowed individuals in, the program continued to expand to having adults and seniors. And specifically, that was probably my most rewarding teaching experience. It was a situation in which you educated and taught artists to create artwork, and all of these individuals in the program had some semblance of a disability, clearly stated, psychotic, schizophrenic, manic depressant, physically unable to move around, any number of things. And we approached it in a way in which it allowed them to create art in which they got paid, had galleries and shows, and they got great exposure. But it was a rewarding thing, and it woke me up to the fact that having a disability or having some kind of handicap should not restrict you in any way, shape, or form from still being creative and still doing and being a contributing member of society. It was challenging at best. I'll tell you one quick story, and that is I had a very good student who made these beautiful, delicate bowls. And on one particular day, he came at me and said, "I'm gonna kill you." And 5 seconds later, "I love you, man." We had a really good rapport. He made some really nice work. And to that, I would say that's what we have here. We have individuals who have the potential of making some really good work, irregardless of any obstacles that they have laid before them. That's my story. Welcome again. I'm glad to have you all here. Please, I don't want to eat up too much time. I could go on and on and on, but we're here for those folks. So I want to pass the torch or pass the mic to the next individual, and I believe that is our Associate Dean, Lisa Farrington.
So welcome everyone. I'm the newbie, except I went here in the 70s. And I am very excited about this panel. I want to thank Dr. Ahmed for putting it together. And the avant-garde nature of it, the timely nature of the idea that health and wellness is affected by so many things, including, and not, I don't mean to minimize that, including design and images and the way images are presented to us. The world needs to learn how powerful imagery can be, and if we don't understand that, we don't understand how we're being affected by what we see. And artists, social workers are interested in this, and graphic designers, medical doctors, and our Emmy Award-winning creative director at the end. They are really an avant-garde group of people who are trying to change the way artists and designers create so that the world that we're in is made better by what they do. And on a larger scale, that's really what Howard is about, that we go into fields, whatever they may be, with the goal of making the world better and healthier and happier. So welcome. Let's see if I can get it. Mr. Husak,
Yes.
Dr. Khan, Professor White Johnson, and artist/social worker, Ms. Kitt. Okay, enjoy.
Hey, thank you, Chair Pointer and Associate Dean Farrington, for opening our proceedings today. Hi, everyone!
Hi.
Thanks again for coming out, and thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for joining us today. So I am Miriam Ahmed. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Arts, and it's my pleasure to introduce the topic and our esteemed panelists. So, can graphic design save lives?
Yes.
Well, there may not be a 600 milligram pill that doctors can prescribe, but graphic designers can certainly help improve the quality of people's lives, which leads to healthier societies and longer living populations. And our panelists today will show us just how they are doing that. Now, you're probably wondering, what do a social worker, an educator, a doctor, and an ad man have in common? Well, these four people share a mission. They come from a breadth of professional experience, and they come together to do one thing: to improve the lives of their communities. Usually, when we talk about advocacy work, graphic design and advertising aren't what comes to mind. Design isn't usually associated with doing good. In fact, if we're being completely honest, it's usually associated with doing bad. You guys have probably heard it, right? Weapons of mass deception. But we need to change the perception of the industry, because it's wrong. Graphic designers are by definition problem solvers. Design and advertising create solutions to problems. Visual communication is an incredibly powerful tool that shapes opinions, that educates the public, that impacts every single aspect of our everyday lives, from which apps we prefer, to which phone we spend our money on, to which healthcare and lifestyle choices we make. Graphic designers are the people who create and produce the messaging and the imagery that convinces millions of people to sign up for that one-year gym membership, to pick the fruit instead, to get that eye exam, or to purchase a safer car. Our four panelists have each committed to this mission of improving the health and wellness of communities, and they are here today at Howard to help change the world. Shanell Kitt is a licensed social worker, mixed media artist, and MFA student here in our Department of Art. She received her master's degree from Howard University School of Social Work and is interested in promoting mental health, wellness, and awareness through creativity. As part of this mission, she has hosted several self-expression through art workshops in New York and DC. Jen White Johnson is an associate professor of design and visual culture at Bowie State. Her personal and academic work explores social justice practice. She seeks to cultivate diversity, inclusion, and equity. And she recently launched a zine called Knox Rocks, dedicated to her son, as a way to give visibility to children of color in the autism community. The zine has received international recognition and is permanently archived at the Met and at the National Museum for Women in the Arts. Dr. Akbar did his medical training on the Caribbean island of Grenada. There he served people who lived in an economy classified as less developed, where access to healthcare is far from guaranteed, and wellness standards are lower than what most of us here are accustomed to. Then he moved to New York, where he primarily cared for Medicaid patients. Now he works in the middle of Missouri, in a rural town with a population of about 15,000 people, where he is just one of only 4 pediatricians in the whole town. He's passionate about healthcare on a large scale, healthcare reform on a large scale, and he believes that everyone has a right to quality, affordable, accessible healthcare. The gentleman on the end, Chuck Husak, is the principal and creative officer at August Lang & Husak, which is one of the top ad agencies in the DC area. He has won the advertising industry's highest awards while working with budgets far from high and within timeframes far from reasonable. Chuck wrote and produced the most watched TV commercial in the history of the American Red Cross. And his TV spot for the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons won Best of Show at the Mercury Awards in New York. He's produced successful campaigns for National Geographic, the American Council of Emergency Physicians, Vision Council of America, the Smithsonian, NPR, the Discovery Channel. So, we'll begin with presentations from each of the panelists, and then my colleague, Professor Mark Bartley, will take over. Mark is an Associate Professor of Design and the Coordinator of our Graphic Design program here in the Department of Arts. He has a wealth of professional expertise in the news and magazine industry, and his research interests include digital asset management and nanotechnology applications in design. I think it's safe to say that these 5 people are as unlikely as ever to sit on a panel. But that is what's great about Howard University's Department of Arts. Here, we recognize the necessity of breaking through silos and connecting stakeholders who should be talking to one another, because that's how we change the world, by connecting with those we wouldn't normally and realizing that we share a united mission. So now I will hand it over to Shanell to present what she's been working on.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I want to start by saying thank you to the Howard University Department of Art and Dr. Ahmed. Thank you so much for inviting me. Before we get started, I wanted to give a brief trigger warning. My presentation is a sensitive topic where I'll be talking about grief and loss. And if you feel uncomfortable, please feel free to step outside. And if you want to talk with me after, I'm available. And on the handouts that I passed out a little earlier, I have my email address, and you can reach out to me also in that format if you'd like to share any experiences that you had during my presentation. Right. The title of my presentation is In Remembrance, Analyzing Vernacular Memorials and Processing the Loss of a Loved One. I was inspired to cover vernacular memorials based on my childhood experiences of seeing them in my neighborhood, and I'll show you some images and we'll have a more in-depth conversation about what exactly they are and how they can be used to help people cope with trauma related to the loss of a loved one. This is one example of a vernacular memorial, just to give you an idea of what I'm referring to. And usually we'll see these along the side of a road. Maybe there was a car accident or a bicyclist was hit by a car, or we may see them in a neighborhood in front of a house or a building. But some of the cultural motifs in vernacular memorials include balloons, candles, teddy bears, liquor bottles, and flowers. Alrighty, and I wanted to gauge the audience. How many of you have ever seen a vernacular memorial in person? So almost everyone. And has anyone ever created one? Okay, do you want to share just a little bit about it?
Is it, so when you say vernacular exclusively like outside, or could it be like inside?
It can be inside or outside. Vernacular in the sense that it's indigenous to the people of the culture, and for me, I'm referring to people who live in underserved communities. So it could be inside or outside.
Yeah. So down the street from my old high school, it's a really crazy intersection, like in College Park and Parkdale. So there have been a lot of accidents. There's even been like stabbings. So you'll see a lot of like makeshift memorials that are on the sides of like trees. But it's interesting that they're so close to the schools, so that way like the students can kind of be a part of that experience.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought up that example because I'm hearing a strong sense of community that is surrounded around the memorial, and that's one of the key points that I wanted to bring up as well. And I saw your hand as well. Oh, okay. Thank you. So commonly used items, as I mentioned a little earlier, flowers, teddy bears, or stuffed animals, which are typically seen in memorials created for children who have passed on. Personal items such as clothing, pictures, candles, liquor bottles, and balloons. As a social worker, I wanted to bring in a few core values of social work. Particularly, I wanted to highlight the dignity and worth of a person. And that's highlighted when we are creating the memorial, the importance of human relationships, and also competence. I brought this picture out because I wanted everyone to see the sense of community that is created when a memorial is being built, and the sacred activity of lighting candles. And connecting to design, I wanted to highlight the principles of design, such as pattern, contrast, emphasis, balance, scale, harmony, rhythm, unity, and variety. And in this image, I noticed many of the principles of design highlighted here. Is there anything that you realize that you've seen before, or that you'd like to point out here? Any principles of design?
Rhythm and movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I noticed movement with the color red and how it's transferring from left to right. Anything else that comes to mind? Okay. So as I shared a little bit earlier, the location of a memorial is important. And this, it appears that it's on the side of a building, and we also see other signals that is personal to the person who has passed on, such as specific colors. So maybe this person was affiliated with a gang or other cultural group. So I have, on the next few slides, I have a few examples of vernacular memorials, and I wanted to briefly go through each of them and highlight some of the elements of art and principles of design that I noticed. And if you see any, please feel free to shout them out. But in this first example, I wanted to highlight the artistic, the aesthetic value of the memorial. More noticeably, the shadow that's casted by the memorial, the balance that's created, the symmetry, especially with the white candles and where they're placed. And what's special about vernacular memorials is that they're created by people who don't necessarily identify as artists, but there's an innate creativity that comes to the surface while we're creating this. And also, I really love this example because we see fresh flowers coupled with flowers that have withered. So another element to vernacular memorials is that they usually stand the test of time. They often are not swept away. The elements take care of them. For example, there was one memorial in the neighborhood where I grew up, and it was created about maybe 5 years ago, and I can still see the remnants of it to this day. So there's a respect and a value for the memorials that is placed in the community. This is another design that I thought would be interesting to share with everyone. Although it doesn't seem like there's a tight composition, there is a strong element of pattern here. And also, we can tell that perhaps a child passed away, given the amount of stuffed animals and toys that we see. But I also notice pattern, movement, and variety. And these are elements that the family, they may not be cognizant of when they're creating it, but this also goes to show that when we think about design and creativity, it's not in a bubble. And this is another example of one that is more tight in composition, and I wanted to highlight repetition and unity. And we see there's a strong focus on liquor bottles. There is a teddy bear present, which appears to be the emphasis. But if there's anything else that you notice, please shout it out. Definitely color, and thinking about the elements of art, and shape, also form and value. Texture, absolutely, absolutely. Even the natural texture from the grass, absolutely. Okay. I wanted to touch on health and wellness and how vernacular memorials can assist in the processing of the loss of a loved one. And thinking about emotional impact, when we lose someone, often we go through stages of grief, and we may be in denial at first, and we may reach a point of acceptance, or the stages may happen out of order. But the emotional impact of loss is something that I wanted to touch on, especially in thinking about my MFA thesis. Processing grief and thinking about vernacular memorials. These memorials are great ways for the family and community members to talk about the person that they lost, bring in personal notes, clothing items, and sharing libations with each other while remembering positive aspects about the person who's passed on. And also this ties into healing and flooding ourselves with the idea that we have lost someone, but also using each other as a way to get through the experience together. And also memorials can serve as a sense of closure. Oftentimes, I'll use myself as an example. When my father passed away, my family and I created a memorial right in front of our building, and it acted as a sense of closure for me because I was dealing with the shock of losing him, but in having a memorial to look at every time I left my building or every time I went inside my building that reminded me of my dad, it provided me with a sense of closure and knowing that he isn't here physically, but the altar that has been created possesses his spirit in a sense. And I believe that's what people are achieving when they create these vernacular memorials or shrines. So just briefly about my MFA thesis, I'm creating a series of paintings and I'm processing my own grief and trauma through the use of color and texture through my paintings, and I'm promoting mental health wellness by advocating for the use of art in therapeutic settings. And in doing my self-expression through art workshops, I have incorporated the principles of art therapy into my work so that clients have a different mode of expression. And I've noticed that people feel comfortable discussing trauma while they're drawing. And that's something that I plan to do more research into. So my thesis consists of paintings, memorial installation, my thesis paper, and my thesis defense. All right. In conclusion, I just wanted to show you all another example of a vernacular memorial, and to bring out the point that while generally these memorials are accepted by the community, there can be some issues with law. Because of the items that are in the memorials, it may pose a hazard to the community, or if street cleaners are not familiar with the culture of the neighborhood, they may get rid of it. But I've also, in my research, I've learned that families, when they notice that the memorial has disintegrated, they create another one. And just thank you again to Howard University Department of Art and Dr. Ahmed, and to all of you for listening. Thank you.
How's it going?
Very good.
I'm excited. So I'm gonna float a little bit. I have a lot of slides, so some I may just kind of like whip through, like they're really just here to show like some context. But I'm first off, thank you for having me. I come today as an advocate, as a mom, a wife, a mother, as an educator. And today I'm really just gonna talk about acceptance and about community, and about Black and brown people taking over and reclaiming the narrative of their bodies. I'm gonna talk a little bit about like my kid, because this whole year has been about expressing a little bit more vulnerability, and how art and design can really like empower me as a person and empower like my family. Often neurodivergence and the way that autistic people are viewed in minority communities, there's a stigma. And some of you may have autistic family, or you may have ADHD, and you've grown up with like this stigma, right? The stigma of feeling like you have to mask, feeling like you're not normal. Someone made reference earlier to like the normal, like, and what is that really? So today I'm gonna talk, in my presentation, I'm gonna talk about like really like how mothering and how just revolutionary mothering, re-envisioning what that means as a designer, because first and foremost as a mom, but I'm also an artist and a designer as well, so I'm just gonna show you like some really cool examples of like how I've glowed up in the past like year or so, and how the design community has really been like an advocate for like how I practice. So thank you for showing up, Jen White Johnson. So design allyship is really important. For those of you who want to advocate for the community, it's really important that you understand the community that you're working for. You have to be an ally. And you guys know what allyship means? It means that you have to be one. You can't have one message and they have another message. And you definitely can't work in a silo. You talked about working in silos earlier. Maybe Dr. Ahmed talked about working in silos. You're not really gonna get a lot done if you work alone in a room or in a studio. So this is a cool place to work with your classmates, work with your professors, and get to know what kind of artist you want to be. So this is my mother, so I want to give honor to her, and any advocates, moms, teachers in the room, past or present. I'm half Black, half Puerto Rican. I grew up as a mixed chick. So this is her in Ponce, Puerto Rico. So give homage to her. So she is the person who has really taught me a lot about advocacy. She was a Sunday school teacher, and let me not stand in the projector. She was a Sunday school teacher, and she's like my biggest fan. I love her. So I just wanted to pay honor to her. She's in Florida, hanging out under the sun. She's retired now. So I started off educating 5th graders in Baltimore City. So my heart has really always been about the wellness and about making sure that these kids understand how powerful they are and how amazing they are. And so this was actually while I was a grad student at MICA. And little did I know that working with kids would have a lot of impact before I started teaching college at Bowie, before I started teaching my own kids about advocacy and about accepting himself. So this is the work that I did in Baltimore City. My first teaching gig was actually at Patterson Park Library, teaching typography and graphic design with Black kids in Baltimore, a lot of them who had developmental differences, and a lot of them who had never really used art to empower and to kind of express like that different side of themselves. So a lot of my work deals with identity, and it talks about like accepting yourself and getting the students to feel comfortable with portraiture. A lot of these portraits, they took themselves of each other, and they had a blast. This was like an after school program, and so you can see like they created like their own typographic alphabet, and it was a lot of fun. And this was actually before I knew that I wanted to like be an educator full time. So I really wanted to show a little bit about other communities that I'm involved in that talk a lot about designing for possibilities for well-being and health. you guys should definitely check out Denise Ashanti Brown. And you can come up to me afterwards to get her information. So she works out of Micah's social design program that talks a lot about wellness and making sure that women feel like they can walk into a doctor's office and get the care that they need. So I was a part of a cohort and I did portraits of all these amazing women that were basically given the opportunity to create prototypes. So a lot of them had issues with depression. A lot of them had issues with, coming out. A lot of them had issues with their own horrible wellness stories. And so this cohort, I really wanted to show you what happens when Black women assemble and when they answer all of those questions. So they had some really beautiful poster designs last year. So read this: how might we reimagine patient-provider relationships to meet healthcare needs of Black women? So each of these women on the cohort were given the opportunity to form a question, and then from that question came the portraits, came the prototypes. So this is Chigo, and this is Ineka. So Ineka talked about wellness and relationships, and Chigo talked a lot about, well, this is the kind of doctor that I want to be, and this is how I want to be able to serve my women, my community. So here are examples of some portraits that I was able to take that talked a little bit about the experiences that they wanted to be able to have when they talk about wellness. So Chigo, I don't know if you guys can see, but so she basically, and this is Ende, who's a graphic designer. So they had women partner up with designers to kind of come up with assistance for prototypes. So this was experience-centered healing. So she created this really beautiful map that talked about from what happens the minute that a woman steps into a doctor's office. What is her experience like? Those are questions that we don't really ask. And then we think a lot about how women stay away from the doctor's office because they know that they're not going to necessarily feel welcome, or they may be called out on, hey, where have you been? No wonder why your body is in such shape. Well, what about my spirit? Can we talk about that? So here's a close-up shot of basically experience-centered healing, making sure that the experience of a woman feels like she's welcome. Are we really talking about wellness? So this was amazing. I really loved how a graphic designer and a doctor were able to kind of come together to create this really beautiful map of healing. What would that look like? So just know that these conversations are happening. A lot of people are really getting a sense of Black women need to basically take over and reclaim the narrative of how they want to be seen and how they want to be approached when it comes to wellness. So here's some more portraits from that cohort. So staying in a relationship out of a sense of duty or blind loyalty is unhealthy. So it was just really beautiful to be a part of this experience, to make sure that women were seen and heard. And this was an entire event. I got a chance to shoot portraits of the women and moderate this really amazing panel. So it was just really beautiful to be a part of that. So another really interesting question. So how might we position Black women as leaders in the design process to reimagine collective well-being creatively and holistically? So if you're ever in a situation where you have to come up with some sort of topic, ask yourself a question. What are some things that are plaguing my community? All right. So this is me, y'all. So this is my son. Miriam said I have 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna buzz through these. Alrighty, so I just wanted to preface you with what I do in the community, but this is my heart and this is my soul. This is my community. So this is my son. He was 2 pounds, 15 ounces. So he was diagnosed as autistic at 2 years old. So when I first found out about his diagnosis, these were the articles that I read. Parents are poisoning their children with bleach to cure autism. Do you think that, how was I supposed to move forward from that? Where was I really supposed to go to get educated about autism and what that really meant for a Black kid and for a Black family? So his diagnosis began to redefine my role as a mother. Photography, my art practice, diversity in children's book, there was a lack of it. So as you can see, 10% of African American kids are represented in literature, period, and this is in 2018. So it was really my job to help to break the unjust stigmas. the zine. I encourage everybody here, students especially, publish. Publish what's in your heart, publish what's in your soul, because it'll open up doors. So publish what you don't see. Publish what you feel like you don't see enough, especially as it has to relate to vulnerability in your community. So this is what happened. Coming into the studio with me, listening to other autistic individuals, understanding how I could use design to empower, especially Black autistics. So advocate Black autistic voices, experiences, opinions. Spending a lot of time, this is Nicholas, a student at Bowie State who's autistic. He still hasn't even informed the university that he's autistic because he's so afraid of losing scholarships and feeling like he has to normalize himself. Other assignments that I've been able to work on with my students, workshops. So just know that the minute that you really decide to kind of use your design skills and your art skills to create and assemble community, a lot can happen. And think about how you can empower. And then think about how you can take like those most vulnerable parts of yourself to provide not necessarily healing, but acceptance. Because you're not trying to cure anybody, right? You're not trying to change anyone, right? You're just trying to empower them. So workshops, I've done workshops with moms in the community. And again, like my son is a huge part of my work, and he's been able to just make me a better artist, make me a better individual. So it's exciting. Joy is something that's highlighted in my work. I take him to protests with me. So I was a part of like a huge art bill. This was at the Women's March last year. So it's been really exciting to let design take over and let it empower who we are as a family. So nice feature in Afropunk. Square, a huge, you guys know Square? The swipey folks? So for those of you that are entrepreneurs, just know that they really advocate for autistic acceptance in the workforce. So it's really important that, you know, as designers, identify who are the companies that are really empowering folks that are silenced. All right, so your job as a student here is to liberate yourself, and then what are you going to do after that? Liberate others. Fannie Lou Hamer, y'all. Yeah. All right. So be my homie. Come up to me afterwards. I have so much more to say. Thank you so much. All right.
Hello again, I'm Dr. Akbar Khan. It's an honor to be here at Howard, and I think this is a very fitting location for this discussion, and I'll circle back to why that is. When Dr. Ahmed first asked me about what did I think about this panel idea and what I want to contribute, I had no idea how to answer that question, because when she asked, does design matter in healthcare, I thought, duh, it's not obvious that design matters for anything, because we're human beings, we use our senses to take in information, and we put it through our own internal process, but it always comes through some kind of a filter. And that design, not to reduce design to just that statement, but design is part of creating that filter. And that applies to anything from marketing to healthcare, etc. And there are instances in healthcare delivery and health and wellness that are employing the skills and tools of design, but I feel just as there's an inequality in how we deliver healthcare, there's an inequality in how we apply the utility of design and the way we deliver that healthcare. And that's kind of, I guess, the way I approach this. And that's why I think being here at Howard is very fitting that, you know, a lot of the students here fit a population that is very underserved medically, like we just heard from Professor Johnson. I think she said it a lot better than I can. Both for racial reasons or for reasons of having conditions like autism that traditionally have been stigmatized, that now are getting a lot of positive attention. But there are a few that are, and many issues that are not getting the attention that they also deserve. And that's where you guys can come in. It's not a one-way street, right? It's physicians becoming involved, healthcare administrators, more than anybody, because they hold the checkbook, and they're the ones making the decisions where to put marketing dollars, what we're going to advertise, and etc. And I noticed a trend in doing my research for this, that most of the places where you do see design applied is where the money is, like pharmaceutical companies or hospitals advertising that we have this percent of a cure rate for this condition, or etc. We offer this and that to get more patients to come there. but that's not appropriate, I think, in delivering healthcare. That just furthers the inequality in healthcare delivery. So I have just a very few slides, just pictures to demonstrate some of the concepts that I wanted to talk about. You guys can feel free to intersperse with any questions. I did want to share a good study because as physicians, I don't know if you guys know this, we love studies. You can't convince a doctor of anything until you say, oh, there was a randomized clinical trial that showed, drug A versus drug B had statistically significant benefit. There were not any that I could find relevant to this topic. Maybe a few. They were kind of tangential to what I was looking for, but there is not a lot. There are studies about communication and how that affects healthcare, and design, again, is one filter through which we communicate. And studies time and again prove that better communication between a provider and a patient leads to better outcomes, better compliance with medications and prescriptions, patient satisfaction, which is a huge thing that hospitals care about now because a lot of their metrics are driven by patient reviews. And, I think that's good to a degree, but patients are not physicians. They're not rating doctors based on their medical knowledge. They're going to base that on their experience with that person. And that really boils down to communication. But I don't think people are really looking at other non-verbal interpersonal ways that we communicate with patients in the community. Also communicating to providers as well, because I'm not in a lab researching the things that I'm saying to patients. So somebody's communicating that information to me. I process it, I communicate it to the patient, they process it, and there are a lot of filters in that process, and I think that's where design can play a huge role in improving the way that we're communicating. So a great example is a prescription bottle. There's a lot of information on that, and it probably is gibberish to most people here. And it doesn't really, is there a pointer here? Maybe not. It doesn't really highlight what's important. You might not notice, this is hydrocodone. That's a narcotic that could potentially be fatal to somebody. But it's less noticeable than the word pharmacy on the bottle, and that's kind of absurd to me. We do have warning labels on prescription bottles, and I think I have a slide coming up with that. But I think we could do a lot better. And if you look at on the left there's a ton of data on there, and it all does need to be there in some way or another. But maybe a designer would be better than a pharmacist at figuring out how to deliver that information in a way that's useful and safe for patients. Medication errors happen a lot, and we were just discussing earlier, this is just within hospitals. If you combine medical errors, drug reactions, physician errors, total are the #1 cause of death in a hospital. Today, which 100 years ago I could accept that, but today that's insane and unacceptable. And a lot of times it comes from misreading labels, not just patients, but nurses. In my residency, we had a patient receive the wrong antibiotic because a nurse misread the label. Sometimes the wrong patient will get a medication because someone's misreading their little wristband where their name is in tiny little print. So there are mechanisms in place, there are barcodes and etc. And sometimes you have two people together to make sure there's not an error. We're not shooting in the dark, and I don't want to give you the wrong impression that we're just killing people at the hospital. Medicine has come a long way. But clearly there's still a lot of room for improvement. And here are some of the warning labels, which again is better than not having them, like we probably didn't have 50 to 100 years ago. But do not drink alcoholic beverages. That's a benzodiazepine that can kill you if you drink alcohol, but that's not really communicating that to you. If somebody is an alcoholic or they abuse benzodiazepines, they might see that and think, oh, okay, whatever, they're just giving me generic advice. That might be on any pill, don't drink alcohol with your pills. It's not really communicating why, and the reason is that if you drink too much and take this pill, which the pill alone may not be fatal, but combined with alcohol can be, and is to a lot of people. It's a common way that people overdose, is taking benzodiazepines, combined with other CNS depressants like alcohol. And again, on the other one, keep out of reach of children, that looks like something that was printed in 1955. And if you're somebody who is illiterate, which is a larger proportion of the population than we might think, we take it for granted that we can just read the label. Not all people may be able to. That picture of a child with their hand out doesn't make any sense to me at all. It doesn't convey any useful information. And you may not even see that label. It's printed the opposite orientation as the rest of the text. You're going to take out your pill, put the bottle back on the shelf, and maybe never even notice that those labels are on there. And on the other hand, we have much nicer presentation here from a pharmaceutical company because they have money and they recognize that advertising helps them to make more money. So it's an example that people are not blind to the value of design in healthcare. It's just, like I said, there seems to be an inequality in where it is applied. So I'm not dogging on marketing at all. Very useful.
I'll get you back.
Yeah. So you guys should keep doing what you're doing, but maybe these guys should be taking some notes also. And and in these pharmaceutical ads as well, they're highlighting the information that is important to them, and often it's very irrelevant to the drug itself. And maybe that's where better communication to the physicians and between physicians and patients comes in. Patients will come in asking about drugs that are completely irrelevant to their condition, or they're not the right age group, or they're not at all applicable to them. But advertising works that well that it gets people's attention. I don't think those things are getting people's attention. We still have lots of overdoses and drug issues. And then I also wanted to talk about interior design as well. I think is something that we often overlook in healthcare. And this was something that I probably never would have thought about until I read a study while I was in medical school that demonstrated to a statistically significant degree the design of a hospital room can affect the patient's mental health, especially elderly patients, definitely patients with dementia or other underlying mental health disorders, but even those without any of those conditions. Being in a sterile looking room with no color, none of your items from home, no window, no clock, it's very disorienting and can actually drive, especially an elderly patient who's even not previously suffering from dementia, to a clinical degree of dementia. And obviously, I don't need to go on about how mental health certainly affects your physical health as well. And there are some hospitals that are taking this to heart. This is, what my example of not good. It's pretty nice, it's clean, it's probably nicer than any hospital I've worked in, but look at that room, it's sterile, there's no sense of time, it's like being in a Vegas hotel, you have no idea if it's 2 a.m. or 3 p.m. outside. You see random people coming in and out wearing hospital clothing, you're in a gown, you're not in any of your home clothes. It's very, very disorienting, especially to young children, elderly people, and nobody's going to be happy in there, even though the waiting room is pretty decent. You can contrast with a place like Memorial Sloan Kettering, where they get millions of dollars in donations because they're a big fancy cancer institute. You get a nice view of was that the Williamsburg Bridge? I'm not sure, it's been a while since I lived in New York, but I'm not sure if these are actual rooms or models of rooms they're planning, but I've been there before and they are that nice. So studies have shown that it has a positive effect on the patient's experience, their mental health, which translates to better outcomes in their physical health as well. I think, that's all I had. So my point essentially is, clearly design has a huge impact in healthcare delivery and communication between providers, administrators, patients. There's just a huge inequality in how we apply that value. So maybe that's where, a lot of it is, like I said, money. And maybe you guys would know how to turn this room into this on the same budget. Administrators will just always assume that we can't afford it. Doctors will keep asking for what they want and keep being told we can't afford it. So we do need more interdisciplinary conversations, get more of you guys into administration, talking to them about what you can make possible. With modern technology, we can do a lot more than we could even 10, 20 years ago. One thing they mentioned in that study too is flooring. Floors are slippery. They do that for cleanliness, but older people fall. But now we have new textiles and new materials that maybe you guys can design to look good, and somebody in engineering can design to still be sterile without causing so much of a fall hazard. But that's stuff that physicians don't usually think they have the time to think about, and administrators assume they don't have the budget to think about. But I think that's wrong, and we should start thinking about it differently. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Great pleasure to be here. Okay, I'm Chuck Husak from August Lang and Husak, and my role there is to be the good-looking one. I'm going to take a slightly different. Actually, it's a pretty good segue from our last presentation. We'll talk about design and advertising for a slightly different than design in a lot of other applications. First off, healthcare is an amazingly huge category. I mean, Google Healthcare, Google Sports, you know, I mean, you'll be there for weeks just looking at all the different organizations and places and venues where healthcare manifests itself. And a lot of those places are very design dependent. So who designs in healthcare? All these different kinds of groups. Some are for profit, some are associations, some are nonprofit, some are off-the-shelf aspirin products, and some are vast healthcare systems. But they all depend on design to make an impression. Now, they might be doing things like websites that are obviously important to their brand, important to tell people exactly the kind of company they are, what their personality is, and of course, newsletters, magazines, and so on and so forth, right down to labeling and logos. The labeling, I think, is an excellent segue. You don't think of design, when you think of design, you think of something more grand than a label. But a label is so important in healthcare. And then finally, you have public service announcements. That is a focus that I'm going to get into here because it's more an advertising venue. Now, design is one discipline, but there's a flavor of design called art direction. And art direction is where I'm most involved with in advertising. Anyone want to take a shot at defining the difference between design and art direction? Anybody? Yeah.
Is design more so like what you want to do, and the art direction is how you want to do it?
Something to that. Something to that. I'm not going to set myself up as being the final arbiter here, but I do have my own personal, humble, but deadly accurate opinion. In advertising, design is communicated through all these different venues. Streaming videos, TV spots, and so on and so forth, digital print ads, and of course some of the outdoor, and you can go up and down Georgia Avenue now without looking at the bus shelters. They all have a healthcare message. Some about wounded warriors, veterans, or clinics, or depression, but some of them are designed pretty well, and some of them you really just have to walk up to and look and study to figure out what the heck they're about. But that's a whole other story. Now, if you were going to design a poster or a piece for art direction, or rather for advertising, you might go on a stock illustration site and come up with just about 1 million of these tchotchke little illustrations that are supposed to help you embellish your message with healthcare imagery. I implore you, don't do that.
I agree.
Yes.
It's generic, it's boring, and it's not using the ammunition you have at your disposal. Or by photography, same story.
Yeah.
This is like business stock photography, where you have people sitting around a conference room looking at each other over each other's shoulders at the computer. What is conceptual here? Don't do this either. This is not design. This is taking up space. So I maintain, and I submit, that art direction is designed with a persuasive concept. In other words, design often comes up short by just saying, let's just graphically embellish something. Let's make it look nice. Let's make it look handsome. Let's make it look attractive. Fine, I'm not selling design short, but I'm just exaggerating to make a point. But with art direction, you're using design to persuade, to enhance a concept, and further an idea, and ultimately persuade somebody to do something they weren't apt to do before, or think differently, or act differently, or believe something different. That's art direction. Now, you're probably wondering, what kind of specific things am I talking about? Well, thank you for asking, because I have the answer to that question. Now, this is a bus back that I took off Metro's site about 2 weeks ago, warning against the dangers of prescription opioids. And this is a message we all have seen a million times. Prescription opioids can be dangerous and addictive. Is there a light that goes on there? No, I think we all know that. But what about the graphic embellishment? A guy looking at a bottle. Does that make the message more poignant, more urgent? I think it's taken up space. I think they went for low-hanging fruit there. So what if we just kind of unscramble this message a little bit and take the same kind of message? Painkillers are easy to get into, hard to escape, and take an art direction approach to trying to make that message a little more important. Okay? Suddenly it's dramatic, it's a little scarier, it's a little more illustrative of the position you find yourself in when you're under the influence of this kind of addiction. What about a sport talk you might be familiar with called overuse injuries? When I was in high school, kids played all sports. Now there's specialization, where a kid will play soccer all year round, or swimming, or tennis, or baseball, and kids throw baseballs all year long if they're good at it, because it's competitive when they get to the next level, they better be very good at it, or even golf, or swimming. All these sports find themselves prone to overuse injuries, where a kid does one thing all year round, and he gets soft tissue injury, and needs surgery, and pretty invasive. Well, let's unscramble that image a little bit. Sometimes the game they love doesn't love them back. And what do we say on this kid's arm? A scar? Stitches? How about a seam of a baseball? Conceptual art direction. Further an idea. It's all about persuasiveness and effectiveness. Can you make your message more effective? Okay, here's another no-brainer. It's my specialty. Don't dive into shallow water. Now, this isn't something where millions of kids get hurt every year, but it's a topic where a couple hundred kids get hurt every year, and many of them become quadriplegic. So how would you improve this message? You could do a bunch of banners, you could hang a bunch of signs that just say, don't dive into shallow water. And you can put them around swimming pools and creeks and rivers and docks and everything. But what if you would use art direction to try to put a little punch in this message here? Suddenly it's a little more vivid and a little scarier and a little more attention-getting. One shallow dive can wreck a neck. We all know the benefits of resistance training. Barbells, dumbbells, machines. That kind of exercise builds strong bones. And you need strong bones. You're going to need a framework the rest of your life. Okay, resistance training builds strong bones for life. There's the message. But is it enough? Can you make that message more strong, more important, and more interesting? This is what art direction is all about. It's design, but it's design with a concept, as in idea, not just visual, but your brain as well. Cars and bikes. Cars and bikes have been duking it out in DC for decades. Bikes aren't always right, cars aren't always right, but there's a message here. If a bike needs a car, the bike's going to lose. And that's a message for a car driver. It's a message for a bike rider. It's not so important who's right or who's wrong. It's about avoiding the median. Riders aren't always in the right, but they are always fragile. So let's build the bike out of bones, because bones are fragile and they break. This is a bone bike ad. Okay, here's one of the most boring kinds of topics. Insurance companies want to make sure you have enough coverage, right? And if you were to go to the emergency room, there's a good chance you would get a lot of invoices you weren't expecting to get, because you see a lot of specialists maybe when you're even unconscious in the emergency room, and that can add up. But do you have enough coverage in the, for your emergency room visit? Who's going to read that? Are you going to read that? I'm not going to read that. Are you going to read it now? So again, you've embellished and enhanced the concept by making it more interesting and furthering the intellectual content. You're not making it harder, but you are giving the reader a little bit of a T to cross and an I to dot in the end. Back in the day, this is the first example of this kind of thing, this interactive advertising. Not digitally interactive, but you're inviting the reader to come in and finish your idea. Okay, what about design and video? This is probably not going to work. I'll try it anyway. And I'm only 2 slides away from my end, so I can come back and show you this. But you can just do this art direction thing that I'm talking about here, in video as well.
Fantastic. Look at you. You look.
Ooh, it's really hot.
I am hot. I never say this to anyone, but it's perfect. Today, people seem to care a lot more about how good they look than how well they see. And that's a big mistake. Because an eye doctor can see things you can't, like the first signs of glaucoma and other serious health conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure. Conditions you want to know about sooner, not later. For men and women over 40, it might be wise to look into your eyes.
Example coming up here.
And be better. For more information, visit checkyearly.com. A message from the Vision Council of America.
A simple little diopter is stuff we've all seen when we've been sitting in that chair. Is it more clear this way or this way? But it ties in conceptually to the idea people are more concerned with how good they look than how well they see. So, art direction is design plus, the way I see it. You need to look good, you need to look handsome, you need to be attractive, but you also need to further the message and not just embellish it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have a quiz for you. I'm going to give you the information and then test you afterwards. So my name is Marcus Antonius Brutus III, and pretty much going to ask you to give me about my name.
Is that the quiz?
Yes, that's the quiz. Easy one. Very good. Anyway, welcome everybody. I'm Mark Bartley, like Marcus Antonius, but my friends call me Marcus sometimes. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for putting on this wonderful forum. The first time she mentioned it to me, a whole bunch of questions and a whole bunch of ideas just kind of flew in front of my mind. And once I spoke to her, and she kind of gave me the context, I just kind of was overwhelmed, blown up by this idea. There's several things that come to mind, and of course, our panelists address a lot of these ideas. So thank you for expanding some of these ideas that I have made, and also to help to educate the audience on some of these things that sometimes we don't even think about. For instance, Dr. Khan mentioned the environment that we experience our healthcare products or healthcare services. Ms. Kitt, she talks about something that we don't talk about much, which is how do we breathe? How does design? How do these memorials contribute to our health? And of course, Professor Jen, she graciously invited us into her life with her son, and to venture into an area that we don't talk about much either. It's quite difficult. And it's just a wonderful experience to have you here to share this with everyone. My job is to moderate. Moderate what? Well, I'm here to moderate the rest of the proceedings and also to facilitate some questions and responses from some questions from the audience and some responses from our panelists. So I took notes because that's kind of what I do, but I have so much stuff that it's so difficult to cover everything. But one of the things that came to mind when I first started thinking about the idea was when I looked at the title says Design for Life, and the subtitle is the impact of graphic design on healthcare and wellness. And then I asked myself this question. I'm a graphic designer by trade, but then I started to see the blending or the convergence of design beyond just graphics or the communication design that we do. We start to think about like the space in which we receive our healthcare. We start to think about what the labels, the containers look like, and so on and so forth. So therefore, I see a broader concept to design here. We're talking about, so instead of using the word graphic, can we just take the word graphic out just for a minute? Or, because as you can see, most of what we're talking about go beyond just the communication aspect of design. So it's also empowering you to ask questions that are not so narrow, right? So one of my first questions to, and this is open up to the audience, anybody can respond. So this is for Ms. Kitt, Shanell. When you talk about vernacular design, can you explain the mechanics at work in terms of how does the assemblage of the pieces, where they are placed and all that, how is that therapeutic? Can you explain the mechanics of the therapeutic nature of the whole thing?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. I shared a little bit about my experience losing my dad, and thank you. I shared a little bit about my experience losing my dad, and a little bit about the neighborhood where I grew up. I'm from the Bronx, New York, and I grew up in an underserved community. Many of the families were low-income families, like how my family was, and I remember we would lose people due to violence, maybe drug overdose. My dad, he passed away because of severe medical conditions that wasn't managed properly. But I remember seeing these memorials come up in my neighborhood, and I would see the liquor bottles, and from what I know, liquor bottles represent sharing, community, good times, and that's how I connected the use of liquor bottles in these memorials. Flowers, when we use flowers for funerals, for romantic engagements, but for these memorials, they not only add to the beauty of the memorial, but they also honor the person or people who have passed on. And when I think about, when I was doing the research into flowers, they're a life source, and I believe that the use of flowers on these memorials brings a sense of life force to something that may not be breathing otherwise. The candles, I showed a photo of a group of community members lighting tea candles, tea lights, and what that meant in a sacred space. So when thinking about the composition, I don't believe that families go into creating these altars or memorials thinking about the composition or how they want it to look, but after they start to engage and they step back and they see, wow, okay, well, if I put one right candle to the left and I put one to the right, then they're having a conversation within themselves about balance and composition. So at first they may not realize what they're doing, but ultimately the end result looks like it was aesthetically purpose in that sense. But I believe I answered your main point.
I think we get it. Abby, do you have any questions for her?
Yes. How do you think we can get maybe like cities and like officials to really understand and accept the importance of these vernacular memorials? Because a lot of times, yeah, they do just get cleaned up and it's not taken into account that a person's life was lost and people want to remember and celebrate their life. So how do you think that that can be implemented at a higher level?
That's a great question. I believe definitely advocacy and awareness of what it means to not only the family but to the community at large. So I would say speaking to community leaders and having them understand the importance of these memorials and letting the community know, just bringing a validation to these memorials because we construct them without thinking twice. I know when we were creating one for my dad, there wasn't a question of, well, why are we doing this? It was more so, well, what color candles are we going to use? Are we going to print rest in peace t-shirts? All of that goes into commemorating our loved ones, but I think it definitely advocating for the purpose of these memorials and having people in power who are creating spaces here, but we have to say and why it's important to us and the fact that we don't want them to be swept away. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so one of the other things too that I looked at, or I tried to grasp myself or to seek some kind of answer to was that of social responsibility and sensitivity. And this can be answered by anybody in the audience and also chime in. How does design or how should design address issues that are considered to be taboo in our society? And a taboo from the standpoint of they could be related to personal health, where people don't want to talk about them, or it could be taboo in the sense that society looks down at you if you participate in certain activities, but nonetheless they're hazardous to your health. How can design help to bridge that gap of lack of information and people who need these things not getting them because they're so ashamed? How can design address some of those things?
So especially when it comes to things like stigma, right? I think one of the things that has been really beneficial for me is becoming best friends with the folks that are like my kid, you know? Surrounding myself with other autistic individuals, seeking them for counsel, making sure that even like my son's therapists and clinicians that he's been working with and his educators feel like they have like a really good relationship with my family, with my son. And it really kind of helps to get a sense of, okay, so what are these individuals, what do they want to see? How do they want to feel? How do they want to be more accepted? And it really comes from having that conversation, not feeling like, oh, I have to keep my son away from that community because I'm trying to normalize him. But he's going to be autistic for the rest of his life. He's going to be an autistic adult. So I want to be able to form relationships with folks from that community and having conversations with them about, okay, so what are some of the things that you wish you saw more when you were a kid that would help you feel like you didn't have to normalize or didn't have to mask? You know, what's some of the language? What are some of the messages that you feel you wished you saw? So my responsibility as a designer and as like a visual thinker, as an advocate, is to kind of help form those visuals that allow for them to feel like, okay, we're being seen, we're being paid attention to, and that's been the most empowering thing, is having those conversations with them.
Okay, so I want to elicit some kind of response to this. Can you just identify yourself and let them know who you are?
Yes, I'm my mother's favorite son. No, I'm Kelly Von Anderson. I teach here. I teach painting and sculpture and foundation. So, first of all, this is an amazing time. I mean, especially when you want to hear this. You know, sometimes it can be dull if you don't want to hear something. Okay, but I really wanted to hear this. For many years, as a matter of fact, what I've identified as, I'm not a trained doctor or clinician, but through 50 years of teaching, I found that they're teaching certain students, there's a certain pain coming into the classroom until they find their voice. Once they find their voice, then they become great speakers and orators and so forth. When they sort of come out. Now, I said, she's in a lot of different ways. What I want to ask is that with what we have described sometimes in the medical field as a deficiency or lack of, can it be that in the balance of forming a personality, that person is actually exceptional in another area? You know, in terms of balance. We can't always be great at everything. But does it balance out that once they find their voice, I found this to be true, then they become exceptional in that particular field? Do you share that view, or do you have another perspective?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time not chastising my students or my kids if they have to get up and take a break, or if they have to stand or, you know, pace. It's like, I'm not going to waste my time trying to change your behavior. That's not my job. You are who you are, and you're amazing. My job is to like accept your differences, and for you to use that in like your artwork, for you to use that like in your community, like. And then the minute that they're like, wow, like I'm encouraged to like surge deep within myself, like you said, that's when they become exceptional. And that's it. Like, it's not my job to, I don't even have to put pressure on them. It's like, all I have to do is encourage. All I have to do is just be like a vessel to help them amplify. Like, that's it. That's my job. And then I can just kind of sit back and be like, wow, like, look at them shine, you know, and just encourage that. And then that's when you see the true artist form, and you see that they're happy about, yeah, like I can take my autistic self, I can take like my dyslexia, or I can take, you know, my ADHD, and I can like really put that into like my work and like amplify that. And then other kids will feel accepted because they're paying attention. They're like, wow, like they're not masking who they are, so that means I don't have to either. And that goes for faculty too. I have ADHD, and I'm not going to tell someone, like, I'm going to own that, and I'm going to say, hey, well, this is how I manage it, and this is how I deal with it in the classroom as a professor. Like, you know, like, wow, really? Like, you're willing to, like, admit that? Or there's, like, a stigma, too, where it's like, if I admit that as a black woman, ooh, they're going to be like, why is she even here? Like, why is she even teaching if she has, like, this, like you said, discrepancy? But, you know, if I can't even, like, liberate myself, how am I going to liberate them?
Yes.
So.
Okay. Just to kind of touch on both questions, I think these days taboos are becoming much less common. People are okay with us talking about pretty much almost anything, as long as you don't say it the wrong way. But stigma certainly still exists, as Professor Johnson probably knows better than I do. And to your point, I think just exposure, allowing people to find their voice, having somebody like Mr. Husak here present it in a way that actually is effective and makes sense. I thought that opioid ad was great because it's not what I grew up seeing in the 90s with some young junkie looking guy, and you think, oh, well, that's not me, that's never going to be. It was just a silhouette of a person. It could have been any one of us in this room, black, white, brown, whatever. So it kind of brings it home a little better and takes away some of that stigma that only drug addicts are dying of opioids, or only these people are suffering from this problem. Lately, I've been noticing there are a lot of ads for HIV medications. They're not getting into, you know, we're breaking down stigmas, this couple's gay, this couple's lesbian, but they're showing people that are clearly not of a traditional background in that sense, and it's just out there because that's the bigger part of their audience for that medication. So they're speaking right to them, giving them that voice on TV. I think that's great, but it's just unfortunate that it's being done in certain areas and not in others. Like autism, we're now kind of starting to see them getting a voice a little bit, but more for probably white kids with autism than anybody else. There are black kids and Mexican kids and Indian kids and all kids with autism. Mental health in general, depression, bipolar, etc. There's still very little attention. Drug addiction only now is coming into the kind of forefront because opioid addiction is affecting everybody. And, it's just unfortunate that we're not applying those skills to everything, but it's there, and we see the success that we've had in certain areas, like with the HIV medications or like with certain disorders like autism, that by just giving people a voice, you start to erase stigmas, because it just starts to become more common, and people who before might have only had one experience with that shaping their conception of it, or just whatever they heard their parents say about it, now they're seeing other ways to look at it, and how you display that information. A lot of that has to do with how you're designing that advertisement or that pamphlet or commercial or whatever the case may be.
Well, Mr. Husak, just before because I just wanted to add a dimension to it, and we will consider including this in the answer, just a little bit more clarity. So one of the reasons why that question came to mind was the fact that I saw ads on TV where they're advertising stuff for men, like for erectile dysfunction and some other things. And guess what they're doing in the ads? They're showing them being delivered in plain brown paper bags. Right? Now we know what plain paper bags do. So if somebody is delivering something in a plain paper bag, in our society, that's somebody who is a lush, a drunk.
It's not Reader's Digest.
No, it's not. So what I'm trying to say is that being such a taboo stuff, how can design actually fix that? I mean, some physical strategies. That's more towards what you're doing. Everybody has answered it in their own ways, and I do appreciate that. But I want specifically from you in terms of design strategies that can help with that.
I can maybe take a crack at that. I was actually a little more gravitating over to the questions on the floor, but I don't know that it's up to design to really make these taboos, these social issues that are sensitive, to make them more palatable or make them more exciting. I think it's cultural norms that somehow, you talk about erectile products, what about feminine products, what about bathroom products, what about mother-daughter relationships, and the whole abortion question. When my parents were younger, these things were under the carpet. Nobody talked about these things, but now they're out there. And design has followed those cultural segues into an era that we have today where you can talk about them, you can do literally public service announcements or even product announcements that are more vivid and more clear than the way they used to talk in code about some of these issues that people used to have. That you just weren't issues nice people talked about. So it's not so much the design solving the social stigma problem, it's culture bringing the problems into the vernacular where design can make them more accessible.
Yeah. And so that's excellent. So it's like,
you have to remember, if the culture that's already associated with children and adults who have developmental differences, if that culture works against them, it's my job as a designer to fix that culture, right? And to design a society that helps to embrace them. To me, that's what I feel like my responsibility is. So whether I'm using photography or whether I'm using, language or conversations, if I can help to shift that culture, and also if I can help to break the systemic issues too, right? So we see that all the time with where you guys are working and where you're trying to get hired, whether it's Target or whether it's Square. But who are they hiring though? Who do we see that is normally being employed in those design studios, right? So systemically, what are we doing as designers to help break that shift, to break those change? who are the conversations that we're having? Like what are the conversations that we're having, you know? So it's like, how are we gonna break that change? Like, are we talking to like the art directors who work at these firms? Are we talking to the people that are like employing, you know what I mean? Like, how are we able to bring like more neurodiverse folks like into that mold? You know, how are we designing that? Like, to me, that's where the strategy comes into play, and it really starts with a conversation with the right people.
You're talking more about systems design.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And those methods. Okay. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more? Anybody else have any questions? Okay. So here's the other thing. My musings again. These are just some of my musings in the absence. And so this was number 16. Okay. I think I have something like 35. So number 16 was, why are there no menu of health services in a doctor's office? I mean, you go to McDonald's and you can order everything. You go to buy a car, there's a lot of stuff. You go buy a house, but the most important thing is your health. And you walk into the doctor's office, they don't tell you how much to replace an eye, how much to replace a leg, you know, how much to put in a new heart.
Because the system is, I would argue, intentionally very convoluted. I don't even know what you're going to get charged when I provide a service. And in some countries, that does exist, what you're describing. In Japan, the government, along with, I think, a consortium of private and public healthcare providers, they meet, I think, annually, and they do set a menu with set prices, whether you have private, public health insurance, etc. So there are countries that work on that model, not here. And I would argue because there are people making billions of dollars off of things the way they are now, it's going to take a lot to change it. But essentially, that's the short answer. Because of the way insurance operates, the way hospitals operate, it has a lot to do with how Medicare reimburses, but then do you have Medicare, do you have private insurance? The hospital will and it depends on the hospital also. I work for an organization that's not for profit. So I like to think, hopefully, that they're not sending crazy bills home to people, but some hospitals do, and if you don't have insurance, that's like a debt. They can send it to collections if you're not paying that $10,000 ER bill, or if you're going to a public hospital or a charity hospital, they might work with you and set up finances and etc. But there's no way for you to know that essentially before that bill comes in the mail.
All right. So say you could, and you were able to get to go ahead by the government to make these menus. Chuck, can you tell us what that menu look like? Just give us a.
Well, I've actually sort of wanted the doctor to answer this. It occurs to me that, I mean, there are some items, there's some surgical procedures that you might be able to itemize and quantify this way. And I think we've all seen hospitals around the country where hip replacement over here is $14,000 and it's $46,000 over here. Why is that? Well, okay, a hip replacement or a knee replacement might be a fairly tidy medical surgical operation, fairly. But what about coronary bypass? I mean, how do you know what you're going to get into once you get in the chest? And you might need an extra specialist, you might need all kinds of things. How do I know what that's going to cost? So I empathize with the fact that there is this discrepancy and there is this reluctance to say how much I'm going to charge you for this or this or this. That there seems to be a whole vast array of medical procedures that you can't really predict. Oh, that's going to cost $46,000. It's just pretty money, yeah.
Just to add, not even things like procedures, even something as simple as a prescription that you're buying from a retail pharmacy. There are a lot of factors at play, and this is something I learned in the past year or two that a lot of people aren't aware of. There's an industry called pharmacy benefit managers. So their job is to coordinate between the pharmacist and the insurance company. How much is that drug going to cost to you with your copay? So say amoxicillin, a very common generically produced antibiotic, maybe Chuck here as a pharmacist is buying it for $2 a bottle, and he would be willing to retail it for $5 a bottle, making a $3 profit for himself. But if the insurance company and me, the pharmacy benefit manager, we agree the copay will be $8, he's going to charge me $8 with my copay, even though he's willing to sell it for $5. And that extra $3 doesn't go to him, the pharmacist, but to me, as the broker of that deal. And that, okay, is already, I think, a little bit messed up, but in many states where this has not been legalized, the PBMs will have the pharmacist sign a non-disclosure agreement that he's now contractually prohibited from telling me as a patient, hey, buy this without your insurance, I'll give it to you for $5. So you have to ask as a patient. So this convolutes everything. It frustrates me as a provider when I get a call from a family the next day that, oh, they never picked up that antibiotic because they went there and they found out it cost this much, or their insurance doesn't cover it. Or I have patients with ADHD who are on the same medication now for 2-3 years. All of a sudden their insurance is not covering it, or they cover the pill in one dosing but not in another. So if I want to increase their dose or decrease, now they're not covered for the 5 milligram pill, but they were for the 10 milligram pill. It's all very confusing and very convoluted, and at the end it's patients who suffer more than anybody else.
Yeah. And think about how it works against Black moms who have autistic kids, who have no clue like where to start. So I thankfully, like, I'm a state employee, which means that I can, get like that I'm covered to get therapies under insurance, which is magical because that's not privy to every family, So sometimes whether they choose to get their kid diagnosed, like the services, that's a whole other situation. So right, as a designer, would I provide like a menu of like, these are the different therapies and these are the different prices? Because it's all based on how many times a week your kid goes, how long he stays, and what kind of insurance you have. And if he's on medication, like that can bring in a whole other aspect of it too. So, I mean, I'm curious to see like what that would even look like. But I know that like when I was charged for his therapies for ABA therapy for autism, which is insanely expensive because it covers behavioral therapy and then speech therapy, occupational therapy. Sometimes that can be a little wiggly because they're really trying to like reverse the autism, in a way, and people may feel differently about that, but I can't necessarily help how much that costs. The only thing that I can help is, well, I can't afford this therapy, so my kid's not going to be able to learn how to not necessarily behave, but like I would have to quit my job and stay home with him, and then do like my own kind of like behavioral or work with him to just continue to just embrace who he is and not necessarily trying to change him. So it's a much bigger question.
Yes, I agree. In thinking about direct practice with the individuals that I've supported, whether they were autistic or had other significant developmental delays or behavioral challenges, I've been thinking about an effective way to market the services that I do with them. When people hear social worker, they automatically think that we are the people who go into the homes and take the children out. But as someone who is not only a social worker focused on direct practice in mental health settings, but also an artist, I have been thinking of ways to market what I can bring to the table to my clients in a menu fashion, letting them know on the first time that we interact that not only can we engage in counseling, but I want you to know that we can do expressive therapies. If you want to sing, if you want to dance while we're together, if you want to draw, paint, whatever it is that helps you to bring out the experiences that you've had with trauma, I want my clients to feel comfortable enough to do that. And oftentimes when we think of traditional talk therapy, there isn't space for that. So I think it's great to, this may be a bit different from how the menu model is ideally planned out, but just in thinking of how we can have conversations with clients on that first time to let them know what we can bring to the table and to help them feel more comfortable.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, I need to engage you, the audience, in this other musings that I have. And this one is in terms of the medical illustrations that you see on the walls when you're going into your doctor's waiting room or into the doctor's office. What do you think of it? Are they becoming blind spots to you? Do you want to improve? Or what do you think about those things? I just want to hear what your opinions are, your reaction to those things. You've seen them, right? You all see the yucky one that goes on your throat to see, what the tonsils look like and all that. Do they help Do they work for you? Have they become blind spots? What can designers do to get your attention or to make those more functional? Hold on a second.
I don't need a mic, but
Okay.
I'm just,
All right.
my name is Shanell, and I work in the College of Medicine. I have my master's in public health, so this is very, like, interesting, engaging talk for me. Mostly when I go to the doctor's office, I'll be honest, yes, it's a blind spot. I mostly see and, you know, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this because I feel like kind of like pretentious about it, but I mostly see the degrees on the wall. Like I mostly look at where that person is on schools. Yeah.
Well, Chuck, as the admin, can you help us out with that?
What's the question again?
Well, have these medical illustrations on the wall become blind spots? I mean, how can those become more
Well,
functional?
I mean, I think they're a validation that the person you're going to see knows those charts backwards and forwards if he or she didn't write them himself. I was thinking of a slightly different twist on this whole thing. I was in the doctor's office one time getting a procedure where I had to lay on my back, and I was looking up on the ceiling, and the nurse had put little photos of kitties, and chicks, and squirrels, and bunnies. And I'm looking at them, and I said, I guess you have no way of knowing that I was bitten by a rabid squirrel when I was 7 years old. And she said, oh no, I didn't know. She starts taking my, no, I'll do that. But I don't know, I mean, it's, I have to say, if I'm looking at a medically accurate rendition of what a prostate gland looks like, I mean, I don't see that every day, and it's interesting to me. And if I'm going to be in the clinic waiting for the doctor to come in 10 minutes, I'm going to go up and I'm going to kind of look at that because I should get better familiar with it. So I don't know that it's there to make me feel warm and wonderful, but I don't think it's a hazard by any means. You can shoot your gun while the ducks are flying. You're in there and make the most of it.
What comes to mind when I think about medical illustration, automatically I thought about murals that are created inside of hospitals, particularly children's hospitals, to bring a sense of warmth and creativity to the space where it can be dreary for not only a child but their families. And I also love when medical institutions have art programs where the families can engage in and even potentially participate in the creation of the mural. So I believe that adding color to these spaces helps people transition into the space and to process the difference in their lives.
Okay. All right. So I have a few minutes left, and I just want to open that up to the audience. So now you can shoot all your concerns and questions to this open.
And maybe more toward Mr. Husak. How do, like, I guess, the ad team for health care institutes or health, advertisements, how do they address like tropes or like, getting away from stereotypical advertisements that kind of end up isolating or hurting the community more than anything?
Like what?
Like, for instance, so this is like just something I watched in a video recently about, a black man running from a police shooting after them. And that's like something that's like considered a trope in the community. And, the person who developed that video, they thought they were being like socially aware or advocating for that community. So just also like teen smoking. That's another thing too that I think about when I see a lot. I think that teenagers are like, their natural tendency is to sometimes like, they're in an environment where they're like, in a stage where their purpose is to go against what.
That's why they smoke.
Yeah, but so sometimes like advertising, not smoking might also perpetuate that, you know, I mean, just, there's a lot of, I don't know, so sorry, not to cut you off, there's also like, for even the HIV medication, those advertisements, I worry that they are now starting to exclude certain groups from, and you know, they know best who their audience is, but sometimes the numbers that are put out there aren't the real numbers, because there's like a bias to test a certain population, so therefore those numbers are what are shown. I mean, just
you brought up 5 or 6 of my favorite topics. I just want to say, before I went to this, there are a lot of false starts in marketing and advertising, a lot of mistakes. A lot of companies, corporations, and chairmen have had to step back and apologize for a campaign they've done that was insensitive and was misdirected. In the case that you talked about, it was a social issue. And there's problems that arise when too few people control the process. But I've always said the bane in my life is advertising does not get better as the committee to approve advertising gets bigger. Because then it gets tamped down and homogenized and genericized, and it's just room tone. So you need a little bit of punch. Regarding the smoking thing, everything you said about smoking is true, but about 15 years ago, the smoking campaign changed. It became something out of Crispin Porter in Florida developed a campaign called the Truth Campaign, which is not about the way teens don't smoke. It used to be done by showing black lungs and having actors that ultimately died of cancer saying, don't smoke. If I had it to go over again, I wouldn't do it. That's how they used to do it. And to the point we made before, teens smoke because it's dangerous. And if something might happen to me when I'm age 50, I'm 15 now. I don't have to worry about that. I have lots of friends who are 50 and 60 and they don't have cancer. Okay, how do they do it now? The Truth Campaign is about a bunch of executives sitting up in a tower working for tobacco companies trying to figure out ways to get kids to smoke. And a kid might not feel physically threatened by smoke, but he doesn't want to be a chump. If there's one thing a 15-year-old kid doesn't want to be, it's a sucker. So don't hate tobacco. Hate tobacco companies and the executives that run them. It's a different shift. And that to me is a very strategic, smart way to take on a social issue and do it in a way that understands your audience. You can't scare a kid into not smoking. So with regard to this specific thing that is sort of a lightning rod issue, I don't know how that ad came about. I can see that it was done with maybe some good intentions, but I also say you cannot test this stuff in advance. You have to do the ad, and you almost have to put it out there, because if you're in a focus group situation, you're not showing the ad, you're showing a semblance of the ad, you're showing a storyboard, you're showing an animatic, and you've got a control group there, and you're asking them to self-report on the feelings they get from seeing this thing. It's not real. So you almost have to do a campaign or an ad and put it out there to figure out if it's going to be sensitive, insensitive, effective, or mocked, or lame, or whatever. So that's a bunch of answers to a bunch of the issues that you brought up, and it's juicy stuff.
It's a fine line, right? Everybody wants to look woke, but you run the risk of missing that mark and just offending people instead.
So H&M should have put out that advert with like the kid. You guys know what I'm talking about?
The kid wears the monkey.
Yeah. No, not the blackface. Like the kid where he was wearing the sweatshirt that said like the monkey. Like that one. Yeah. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. So I mean, that's really interesting that you say they have to put out the ad first, because I thought that was really.
So I guess the point you're making, Chuck, is that sometimes whatever it is they're doing to the cessation efforts actually exasperate the whole thing. It makes it worse.
Yeah.
So I have a a similar experience. I just went to Jamaica for the winter break. It was lovely. It was 80 degrees the whole time. But one of my friends, when I was leaving, she asked me to bring back Marlboro lights. Okay? And I said, why, you can get them here. She said, no, when you buy them in the inbound store, you can get it like 50% less than what they cost here. This is Jamaica, they don't make Marlboro there, but somehow they have that, you can get it in their inbound store for like, maybe, 75% what it would cost here. So I walked into the inbound store, and guess what I saw? A plain package that says, smoking is dangerous and can cause death or something like that. And very heavy Helvetica, everybody, heavy, thick, black type against. When I walked up to it, there was Marlboro lights in about 10% gray among all the other cigarettes. The one that says cigarette is dangerous and can kill you is what attracted me. And I went over there, and that was it. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, the thing that is most dangerous, they put it right there, and yet, it didn't stop me from buying it. The woman is 85 years old. She has had breast cancer. She runs a breast cancer awareness program, right? And as far as she's concerned, smoking is what's keeping her alive.
Oh.
I mean, it doesn't matter how you cut it slice, that's in her mind, because psychologically, whatever it does to her, she doesn't have to focus on it. And I said, well, you know what, she's 85 years old, maybe it's really helping her.
There are anecdotal cases like that, but consider why teen smoking is down, and it is. The advertising is becoming smarter, public service messaging. The warnings on packs have become more pointed. The price of cigarettes is going up. The places you can buy cigarettes are now reduced. The penalties for selling cigarettes to kids is greater than ever. You can't get cigarettes from vending machines anymore. And, it's harder to smoke now than ever. All those things together, it's like seatbelts. Why do people, it's not just an ad, it's a conversation and a social movement that now creates a change.
But I'm concerned that, I guess I said smoking, but I guess the commercials that I'm seeing more recently are vape commercials. Mm-hmm. And they're more like, they're these jokingly Muppet commercials that is still going back, in my opinion, to the, old version of telling them, no, it's bad for you.
It's going to cycle over. They're under fire. They're under fire. It's, the vape people, the clock is ticking on that whole industry.
I feel I just want to sort of kind of add to what your question. Do you feel like there's enough representation within these rooms in order to prevent those advertisements that can be part of the population that's affected, but it's skewed in a way where it's just like, where it makes it seem like this is the only population that's being affected. So do you feel like there's enough representation for people to not take these advertisements the wrong way, and for messages to be spread to the audiences where it matters, where it truly matters?
I think it's getting better all the time. Inclusion is a trend that's going up. Something that's kind of annoying to me is whenever you show a group of 4 people, you need to show the family of men. You need to show one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these. And to me, erring on that side is almost more conspicuous than it is to show people that might be overrepresented in some way. So I don't have a great answer except to say things are improving all the time. And the most important thing in advertising to me is to know your audience. These are the people that you're talking to and that need to act on your message. These are the people you need to make sure connect and are engaged with your audience in the right way. So it's not perfect by any means, but it's better.
All right, on that note, I say thank you so much for coming Thank you, panel, first of all, Dr. Ahmed for giving us this opportunity to discuss this. We have student Charles Essex, who has some gifts for our panelists. So on behalf of the Department of Art, we appreciate your time and your service.
I would hope how do you along the process from point A to Z, how does nobody say, oh, that might be taking a while away?
Yeah. Okay, guys, so thanks again, and turn you over back to Professor Ahmed.
That was awesome. Thank you so much to all of you for coming and participating. Thank you so much for you for participating, for your presentations, for the discussion. We do have a light reception. We have pizza and drinks across the hall in the conference room for all of you. So please make your way over there and we can continue the conversation.